So I'm assuming you've read the title of this video. So in this video I will explain exactly what I mean by a closed box system and how it relates to the JD-08. I will propose 3 potential solutions to the issue or problem, because I do think it is a bit of a problem, certainly for some people, and I will also relate details of my correspondence with Roland about the issue, and you might find that interesting. So what do I mean by a closed box system? Well, a closed box is something you can't take anything out of and you can't put anything into. Now, I'm referring to the patch memories on the Roland JD-08. There are 256 memories, but you cannot save individual patches to your computer or to any other external device for that matter. So this has several repercussions, if you like. If you are a synth programmer and are happy programming the JD-08, you will only be able to create 256 patches. If you create more than that, you can't store them on your computer for later use. You will have to delete some of the existing patches. So you can't create several dozen leads and basses and pads and effects and drums and percussion and save them somewhere to draw into the JD-08 when you want to use them. You are stuck with 256 patches. But more problematic, I think, is the fact that you can't pick and choose exactly which patches are in there. You can save them to your computer as a block. I'll say more about this in a second, but you can't save individual patches. This also means that if your friend, who also happens to have a JD-08, has created some patches, he says, hey, I'll send these over, you can't load them unless you overwrite your entire 256 patch memory. It also means that companies and individuals who specialize in designing and producing sounds for synthesizers, if they want to produce a patch set for the JD-08, then that would totally overwrite the existing 256 patches. Now, if anyone is going to do this, I suspect one option would be to leave the 81 factory presets alone and just create 175 new patches, so you have the factory presets and their 175 patches. So that is one solution. But if you want to add your own patches, then you're going to have to override some of the factory presets or the board presets. I just think it's a very strange limit to put on a synth like this, and it was a conscious decision. Make no mistake about this. It is a digital synth, so how difficult is it to save these internal patches to a computer? That's a sort of rhetorical question, by the way, but I'll say more about that in a moment. So are there any ways around this? Well, as I see, there are 3 potential solutions to the problem. Now, you cannot save individual patches because the JD-08 does not support system exclusive messages, which are typically used to save and load patches. So Roland could, of course, implement system exclusive in a firmware update. Now, perhaps an easier solution, particularly for Roland, but I'm not a programmer, so I don't know, would be to give us access to the individual files on the computer. Now, let me explain what I mean. Now, on some of the boutiques, such as the SH01A, which I have, and I shall demonstrate in a second, also on the JU06 and the JP, so if you hold down the magic button and switch on the unit, in the case of the JD-08, it is the exit key. If it is connected to your computer by USB, then it opens a disk containing a backup folder. Now this contains the entire contents of the instrument, which you can then save to your computer to back it all up. Now, in the case of the aforementioned boutique synths, not the JD-08 of course, here I will show you what happens when you open the SH01A folder. You can see it has a backup folder, and inside the backup folder are patch folders and pattern folders. And if you open the patch folder, you can see that all 64 patches have their own file. So with some analysis, with a bit of luck, with a following wind and some trial and error, you can work out which patches go into which patch and bank, and you can create your own set of patches to go into that instrument. Now at this point I would like to thank Scotty of Ultimate Patches, who has produced patches for the JU and JP, and if you go to these areas on the website, I shall leave a link to one of them in the description. If you go to this page and scroll down, there are a couple of PDF downloads, and this is one of them. And you can see as you scroll down the PDF that it has very helpfully explained which patch numbers relate to the positions in the banks. So that saves you a lot of trial and error on these particular instruments. With the JD-08, however, if you look inside the backup folder, it only has one file with an SVD extension. And this file, I am assuming, contains the data for all 256 patches. Now, I've double clicked on the file just to make sure it's not a folder of some sort, but Windows recognizes it as a file and it's asking me how I want to open it, which of course I can't do. So the method implemented on the SH01A and the JU and the JP is a bit clunky and time consuming, and it's not an ideal solution, but at least you can create your own banks of sounds, which you can't do on the JD-08. Now there is a third possibility, which would be for Roland or someone to write a bank or preset manager. Now I'm not talking about a fully fledged editor, just talking about a piece of software which would list the 256 patches down one side from backup file 1 and another 256 programs down the other side from backup set 2, and allow you to swap the patches. Now I'm not a programmer, so I don't know how easy or difficult that might be, but if a third party was going to do it, they would have to dissect the file and work out how the individual patches had been stored within this single file. But I think that would be a better solution than juggling 256 file names on a hard disk, not that we have the option. So I thought I would ask Roland about this and contacted Roland Support. So the first reply I got was an email saying they were referring me to a product specialist, so that sounded quite promising. And as if it needed any confirmation, they did actually confirm that it is impossible to save individual patches to the computer. So I asked if it was possible to implement system exclusive messages in a firmware update. And Roland said, please understand we cannot provide information on development designs or future features. So not Behringer then. So I asked if it would be possible to split out the single backup file into individual patch files. And Roland said, please understand we cannot provide information on development designs or future features. So definitely not Behringer. So I asked if it would be possible to create a preset or bank manager, since Roland knew exactly what was contained in this SVD file. Now they must have a lot of absolutely brilliant programmers with them if you look at some of the software releases which they've produced in the Roland Cloud, for example. So I suspect this might take one of them an afternoon, maybe a little bit longer, but I can't see this being a massively complicated software project. So Roland said, please understand we cannot provide. Okay, so you know what Roland said. I'm getting nowhere fast here. So I was really puzzled why Roland, the great Roland synthesizer designer and manufacturer, should deliberately impose this limitation on one of their synths. It's a relatively small synth, but it's not a Volca, and it is nowhere near a Volca price, so it is relatively expensive. So why should they impose this limitation on it? So I asked if they could please explain the reasoning and logic behind this decision. And Roland said, as previously explained, we cannot provide information, etc., etc. And at this stage they pointed out that they were customer support limited to inquiries regarding product operation. Well, I sort of thought that's what I had been asking about, but obviously not. So I sent them another email asking who I should contact to get an answer to my questions. Roland said, contacting the development team is not intended. I think I got that message. And they decided to close the ticket. So there doesn't appear to be anyone in Roland, or at least in Roland Customer Support, who is interested in talking about this issue and possible solutions to it. Now, as I've said before, this issue may not affect you, it may not bother you, it may not concern you. You might be quite happy with your JD-08 as it is. But I really have to wonder who at Roland made the decision not to implement some sort of facility for allowing users to mix and match patches. I can't believe it was a musician. Now, perhaps they're programmers or not musicians. Perhaps they never actually asked the musician, hey, if we don't put this feature in, would it upset you? Maybe they asked them and maybe they said, no, not bothered, that's fine. Now, the JD-08 is a digital synth. It is essentially software, and software obviously takes time to develop. So perhaps some bean counters somewhere up the ladder said, this is just taking too long, this project, you're going to have to cut something out. And perhaps that is one of the things that what I find really puzzling about this. So I can understand this about the lack of sysx, because I don't think that is a major feature in the other boutiques, but combining all the patches into one file so that we poor users can't scratch our way around these files on our computer to mix and match. This doesn't make any sense to me at all, particularly as I am sure from previous boutiques that a big chunk of the code which allows the saving of individual patches in the backup folder would already exist. So they would have had to do more work to combine those patches into the one file. At least that's my thoughts on the matter. Anyway, so they closed the ticket, and a day later I got another email from them. I thought they changed their mind, but no, they hadn't. They wanted to know what I thought of the support I had received. So I will leave it up to your imagination to decide which link I clicked on. So, as I've said, this issue may be a bit of a non-issue to many people, but I also think that to many other serious users it will be an issue, and for some people it may even put them off buying a JD-08, which I think is a shame, because personally I really love the sound of it. And I think it's a shame that Roland couldn't share some of their insight into why decisions like this were made. So let me ask you, if you are a JD-08 owner, does this affect the way you use the instrument? If you're not really a programmer, will this encourage you to learn how to program the JD-08? If you are thinking of buying a JD-08, is this something which is absolutely going to put you off, or does it not really matter to you at all? I would really like to know what you think. Perhaps I am alone in thinking that this is a problem. So do let me know if I am on my own, or if other synth users feel the same way. Now, I did propose 3 possible solutions to this problem. Roland unfortunately does not have a good track record in this regard. It does release firmware updates, but whether it will include sysx or individual patch files, I would be delighted, but I would also be surprised. I think the software solution of a backup preset manager would be an easy solution for Roland to produce, since they know the file format, but I suspect if we're going to get something like this, it may come from a very clever third party. I would certainly be interested in buying something like this. I just think this is a very, I'm thinking of a polite word, it's a very crazy thing for Roland to do, or not to do, as the case may be. And you know, really, I think synthesizer users, when we're spending 350 quid, it's not the most expensive synth in the world, but it is not a vulgar, it's not a cheap instrument by any means. I sort of think that JD-08 owners deserve a little bit better than this. Now, at this point, I would normally say, if you've enjoyed this video, then do consider subscribing and ringing the bell. Thank you, and hit the big thumb. This has not been the most uplifting and positive video I have ever made, but I just think this needed calling out. I think it needed to be said, so I've said it, so I'm happy, and I will leave it up to you and Providence to decide what happens next. As always, if you made it this far, I really do appreciate you spending time with me, watching my videos. So for that, thank you very much indeed. And I'll see you hopefully with something a little more uplifting, a bit more musical perhaps, in the next video.